Um, I'd like to introduce the two people who are my guests today and our panelists. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading here. Sonia Bochart, a design leader in health and wellness for over 20 years, has an extensive background in creating spaces to support both human and ecological well-being. She works nationally as a principal and sustainability leader with Shepley Bulfinch, a national award-winning architectural design firm. Her portfolio includes leading the design for projects in most all building sector project typologies: workplace, healthcare, educational, community, mental health, and cultural centers. And all of those are literally like chapters in the film, really. If you think about it, every part of that falls into how biophilic design can assist. Sonia serves as the recognized leader and educator in the industry, with teaching at Arizona State University's Herberger School of Design and contributing to such groups as Interior Design's Healthcare and Wellness Council and the Advisory Council for the International Living Futures Institute's Biophilic Design Initiative.
It's a mouthful.
Yes, it is, and there's more and a lot of different things. I'm being abbreviated, but thank you, Sonia, for being here. Then I want to introduce Joe. Joe and I graduated high school together. I got to throw that in there. So, Camelback 74, yah rah, go Spartans. But let me tell you about him since then. Joe Zazera is contagiously enthusiastic about connecting people to nature. He has been reconnecting people, nature, and the built environment for 39 years. As the founding principal of Plant Solutions, Inc., he designed moss wall art, living walls, and there's a trademark next to that: living walls, indoor atriums, and living plantscapes. His mission is to create working environments that enhance productivity, reduce absenteeism, manage stress, and improve human well-being. Yet again, all of the chapters of the film itself. These are what the film and biophilic design is all about. In May of 2018, Plant Solutions received Petal certification by ILFI for their moss wall art. Joe holds an MS in biomimicry from ASU and is a certified biomimicry professional through Biomimicry 3.8. And Joe's been awarded Master of the Southwest designation for his artistry and works in the area of living walls. Thank you very much for being here, Joe.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate
Both
that.
of these people have extremely easy websites to go and look at their work. We have shepleybulfinch.com and we have plantsolutions.com. So that's very easy to get to. Sorry we don't have pictures to show, but it's been really an enjoyable thing to learn about that. Now, to my questions, I'm going to ask Sonia for the first part. And I always describe this as the elevator speech, i.e., what can you say from the first to the sixth floor? So what would be the elevator speech for the people who have not seen the film as to what biophilic design is?
All right, well, thank you. Steve, I want to make sure, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for having me, and I want to thank the friends in the room. See some people I know there. So truthfully, it's estimated that we're spending over 90% of our time inside in the US. And as we look around us, those spaces are not always very appealing. They're not very healthy. They're not very inspiring. So biophilia being our innate connection to nature, like our biologically inclined, deep connection to nature, it's taking those strategies of how we feel when we're out in nature, nature's patterns and shapes and forms, and it's bringing that to these spaces so they matter. So we are more productive, so we are healthier, so we are thriving, so we fall in love with these places and we care for them more. So it's a way of just redesigning like we really care about these spaces.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I thought about the film that I thought was really pretty interesting, and this is to Sonia. There was an interesting comment in the film about green buildings and how green buildings have become very sterile buildings. That even though a building may be green and LEED certified, it may not have the same feel as a building that could, you know, benefit from biophilic design. You know, what I had thought about was that our culture went environmental at one time by eliminating natural materials for man-made materials. We went with all kinds of plastics. We went with, you know, different concrete surfaces, pre-made, you know, pre-made casts, metal cladding. When did architects and designers re-find natural materials, and how do they now source?
Oh, okay. So, yes. So you started off with sustainability, not necessarily equating to places that we love and beautiful buildings, and place source so that they're responsive to the unique climate and land that they're designed within. So I just want to mention that to that comment, that's, from what I understand, that was kind of the reasoning that the International Living Future Institute, who administers the Living to construct a pedal around the need to be really intentional as we're designing with human nature connection in the built environment. So that shop, it's an exploration for all team members to come together and imagine the possibilities. So you're spot on that they recognized, you know, we had the highest performing buildings, and yet they weren't the spaces that people wanted to be in. So I just wanted to mention that. And then as far as your question about how materials are being sourced, I think there's a little bit of responsiveness that's starting to happen within the building certification programs that are asking us to source materials that are at least closer, right? Within a certain distance, to the place that they're going to be built. So there's a requirement within that. So that's part of it. But I think that, I think the other part of it just has to do with architects and designers and team members knowing that the closer that we bring and imagine these buildings and the designs within the context, like of the desert or of the Pacific Northwest or of New England, like the more they carry that feel and the essence of place, they are going to use the natural materials. That's what we're responding to. So I think it's just a way to be more contextually connected to materiality.
So, and you know, one of the notes I put down, certainly as reference, please use your own projects if you can, to give us some ideas, especially ones that, because I think one of the things that I really, you know, do want to get into at some point is, you know, the buildings of Phoenix and the Valley. But I wanted to point this both to Joe and to Sonia. Let's say have Joe answer first, but I described Phoenix as a rough climate. When I watched the film, the only place I could really relate to that I had ever spent much time in was a log cabin at Don Hole's Cabins, you know, or you know, basically a rental cabin in Oak Creek. You know, I'm a Phoenix boy, and I, you know, lived in the city all my life. So, you know, a log cabin in the middle of the woods is about the only thing I could relate to that I had, you know, immersing myself in. You know, biophilic design seems to be, from the film, to be all about matching the design to the environment. How do we bring biophilic design to our local buildings and exteriors and interiors? And I'll start that with Joe.
Yes, we live in a very harsh environment, especially when it comes to, in my world, the plant world, exterior plantings. And so we've done a number of exterior living wall projects where the plant palette is very select. I mean, it's very, I guess, selective or minimal. And it has to be like, well, oftentimes we'll get clients that, you know, we want to do this exterior living wall, we want to have succulents. Well, that's great, but succulents do really well outside in Southern California, but those kind of succulents just do not perform well here. They'll melt in the summer. So it's always a challenge for us to source the right material. And oftentimes for exterior projects, I'll talk about interiors in a minute, but for exterior projects, we end up, you know, we have a few favorites that we know will work depending on the exposure of the building. And oftentimes when I meet with a client for the first time and they want a certain exposure, you know, it just can't be done with perhaps often with the plant material they want, the type of plant material they want. So a lot of that is setting expectations and really being upfront with the client when something like this will, again, this is in terms of plant walls, will just not work, you know, just I'm very honest with them. So same thing on the inside, when we do plants indoors or plants on walls, we have a much greater palette, but typically what works inside, because we have these controlled temperature environments, are more tropical varieties. We can't use, you know, plants that, you know, deteriorate quickly or need really extreme lighting. But again, when we meet with the clients right up front, I mean, I've told people, you know, many times, you don't want to do this because number one, you know, you have to have the right, you know, infrastructure, you have to have the right water, you have to have the right lighting, and so it's, and sometimes clients they're not willing to provide that, you know, to get a successful project. There's one exterior job I did in Southern California when I first started doing living walls, and I tried to talk them out of using an exterior landscape contractor who didn't know anything about, you know, living wall maintenance and that sort of thing. And they said, no, we're going to use these people. It's so fine. And then so this contractor just kept calling me for, you know, for how to make this thing work. We ended up going back and kind of retrofitting it for them. But again, these are not, and it's a little bit, certain projects are, if we do them without the right conversation and the right products, they're just not sustainable. And I don't want to create something that can't be sustained properly. So I don't know. So I hope that answers a little bit the question.
Yeah. Sonia, in terms of local buildings, local architecture, how do we build to the biophilic design? And is there a way to be able to not, in my mind, you know, the goal would be to not make it an incredibly harsh wake-up call from outside to inside in terms of the biophilic design, but how does that start, and how does it relate to you know, the local design that we have here?
Sure. So I love our desert vernacular. I just love it. I mean, it's such an opportunity just to be minimal and simple, and, you know, look at light and pattern and the desert landscape and our native vegetation. So I am completely offended. I'll say it openly when people move here and they're like, oh, I want more green and I want more trees. And I'm sorry, you're not in the right place. Stop trying to make this place like home. So love the desert, first of all. Joe and I worked on a project not too long ago. It's actually opening soon. You know, things are on this weird timeline right now. But, you know, I mentioned it, I think it's a nice example of a team and an owner that were just engaged from day one to really think about well-being and sensitivity to limited natural resources and sustainability. And that client is the Donor Network of Arizona. And they're going to be moving into a new home in Tempe. And just from day one, it was just a conversation. The conversation needs to happen up front. Talk about the goals and workshop and envision this. And then when you realize a plant program is really important, hire someone great like Joe to come in and talk about why it matters, because it's simple and they're so beautiful to have in your spaces, and it's overlooked because, oh, it's going to be a hassle to maintain. Well, not when you have somebody to maintain it and that knows what they're doing. So, and that's exactly what Joe did on this project, and came in early, and it's so pretty. And it's, I was walking it the other day and I heard one of the owners, construction day, we're wrapping up final details, furniture, and they're walking through and they said, I can't imagine these spaces without the plants. Cannot imagine it. So, and then this project is just, daylight and art. Like, this is a community that embraces art. We need more thoughtful art on our projects. We need art to engage our community and bring in muralists. And this project does a nice representation of that too. And it just comes to life. And I love supporting our artists. And I think so much for me is you might, biophilic design isn't prescriptive. So you might have a space that they'll say, oh, we have natural light and we have views and maybe we have plants, but I think without art and beauty and, just a local, well thought out landscape plan for, a welcoming, like maybe a simple water feature when you come in, and then that line is blurred between the interior and exterior with some of the, materials that just kind of sweep inside. So early engagement, have partners, getting artists involved. I think it's just really caring about your project community.
Right. So to that note, I'll first ask Sonia and then I'll ask Joe. What historic building in Phoenix do you think best fulfills biophilic design for architecture? Not contemporary, but a historic building. Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I love the space that that's our Shepley Bullfinch office downtown on Central and Osborne, which
Nicely done.
1964, A.W. Sarmiento, Peruvian architect, and it's round and I miss working there. But organic forms all around and beautiful. It's minimalist, so it's not overdone in any way, but what's happening outside, about the light, and if the wind is blowing, and it's got this nice domed concrete ceiling with stained glass in it and geometric patterns. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. I always take people that are visiting, I take them to Taliesin West. I love it. Yeah. Beautiful, again, art's there. It's very grounded, very rooted in place. There was one more that just came to my mind. Well, I think just Frank Lloyd Wright elements, like the inspiration for the Biltmore. I know when people come, they love to stay at the Biltmore. It's it just feels like the earth. It's just beautiful. So the first things that come to mind.
Yeah. Joe, any thoughts about it?
So a couple. I love Haver Homes. I grew up in that neighborhood, and so there's, those, that's not a commercial. Those aren't commercial office buildings, but I love that decor, that design, the mid-century modern motif. And then also Sonia's building. And for a curious thing about that building, I have a little bit of history. When I was starting in the plant business in 1981, I was out prospecting for new work, and I walked into that building. At that time, it was a bank, and they were either remodeling it or they were just getting moved in. But I walked in, and right on this desk was an interior plantscape plan from at the time the biggest plant company that did that work. And so I've always stayed. I didn't get the work, but persevered and continued to do to work in the plant business. And at that time, it was simply, for me, we just did plants in pots and corners in offices. That's what we did. And of course, we did the hanging baskets with the macrames. I mean, that was kind of, the big thing. And, a big account was $50 a month, at that time. So I would say that I have a special connection to that building. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'll ask both of you for and you know the goal I have for you know this talking about this is what if you were going to say to someone, I'd like you to go see a building which will tell you all about biophilic design. In the historic sense, I think that that's very interesting. In the contemporary, specifically in Phoenix, or let's say the Valley because it's big enough, is there a contemporary building that would be considered to be your escape place? That's kind of what I'm thinking of. That it's not necessarily an office space as a contemporary space, but a place that you would want to go to and literally just look at the place and not disturb anyone if you can. I'll go with Sonia first, please.
You should have gone with Joe on this one.
I'll go with Joe on this one. I'll let you ponder. Joe, go first.
Oh boy. No, the thing that pops into mind, it's not a building, but the Desert Botanical Garden, you know, with all the new architecture and all the new things that they've done there is just an amazing place. And another bit of history that just popped into my mind. So my parents moved us here in 1966. And one of the very first places my grandparents who lived here took us was the Desert Botanical Garden. And I remember, and I couldn't identify it at 9 years old, but as I grew into adulthood, I could identify that I had this transformative experience around desert plants from the very first time I went there. And so as I grew older, I knew that at some point I wanted to have some acreage in the desert because I wanted to live in the, I wanted to be surrounded by desert plants. And it took me many, finally, my wife and I built a home a little bit north of, you know, downtown Phoenix, but have fulfilled that dream. And, but you know, it's a visceral thing. The Desert Botanical Garden, again, it's not a building, but it's the place where I would go to hide.
Right, right. I'm going to give mine in a second, but I'll let Sonia take it over for this next.
Joe and I are like spot on because, yeah, the DVG for sure. I love the weaving of the inside outdoor spaces. I love being outside. You know, I think there's a lot of moments. I think there's a lot of projects that are moving in this direction. I tell you, like, it's really difficult for me because I've worked nationally and I see buildings that are meeting the high aspiration of the Living Building Challenge. So they're deeply sustainable and very biophilic. And I feel like we haven't gotten there yet. We have a culture that has not committed in the ways that other communities have to understanding that it is worth it. Yes, it will cost more because you have better technology. You're putting in more upfront. You're caring more about the health of the people that are going to use that space and be in that space. You're caring more about your community. It's like, to me, eating well. So when we can start to convince our community to, again, design like we really care, then I think we'll have some of these spots that we can say we're really proud of. I'm proud of a student housing project that Shepley completed recently on the Polytech campus for ASU. And that campus is gorgeous. I mean, it's very native plant. It just feels natural out there. And it's just a place you just want to spend time.
I'm sorry, excuse me, is the Polytechnic the ASU West or East?
East.
It's the East campus.
So
yeah.
It's the original Williams Air Force Base? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, again, I am always looking for projects that are sustainable, that look at material health and are biophilic, because beauty is more than skin deep. But this project, the team went in and they had a conversation early on about the goals for the project, being sustainable and being LEED. And by thinking early on and partnering with the owner and the contractor, they were able to get a LEED platinum building, which is wonderful. That's what we want to be aspiring to. Right. So I love those moments, and I think we just need to keep raising the bar. We all need to be doing our work, and it's not a matter of blame or judgment. It's just educating advocating. It's about policy. If anyone's interested, getting involved with the U.S. Green Building Council, getting involved with our local Living Building Challenge Sonoran Collaborative. You can look that one up on Facebook. Just get involved and do what you can. Do what you can where you are.
Mine is the Falls over on, I think it's 52nd Street at Indian School approximately, which was, something that I used to, when my parents, would drive us to go eat in Scottsdale, we always drove by it and we'd always see all this white, weird looking machinery all around there. I was always curious about it. And then many years ago, I find out that it's an actual power station. And then many years later, they've decided, the Salt River Project decided, and I guess it would be a City of Phoenix public art project as well. But the fact is that it's just a place where if I want to hear the sound of water and not hear the sound of anything else, and I think that's incredibly necessary in Phoenix on a regular basis. That's the place that I would go to. Okay, so I am looking here at some questions. Yay. Okay, y'all are chatting a bit. That's what you're doing, but I'll take a look at this anyway. All right, Sonia, when you say the community, do you mean architects, developers, property owners, planning officials, all of the above?
Yes, and supporting diversity, inclusiveness, and equity. It's getting community members and the underserved involved and children involved and it's, and yes, that's how it works. That's co-creating, and that's considering everyone's perspective. And it's not just assuming as designers we have all the answers. We should be coming to the table with the questions.
So here we get to the portion of the talk and also the film where we deal less with what is, but what's coming. And, the film itself broke it up very distinctly. Schools, offices, hospitals, community. That was the sections of this thing. I'm going to go to offices first because I really thought that this was one of the more entertaining portions of the film. I want to say that the second most entertaining portion was the chart, which was revealed that spelled out exactly what Sonia was saying, which is essentially you pay a little bit more for a school that's built under the biophilic design, but at the same time, you have less asthma, you have less recidivism, you have all these different things that end up, being values. So essentially, you get more value for your building. It just doesn't cost that much right away. It will be of more value as it goes along. But in the film, what I loved was they mentioned that zoos have evolved from the original cages that we're all used to creating landscaped environments for animals. And the Phoenix Zoo, many of the zoos are really all about like creating that perfect natural environment. And then they cut to a shot of humans working in cubicles. And it was basically, these blank cubicle walls. And certainly, that was one of the things that I thought about as I looked at this film. At the same time, 2011, 2020. My question for both of you, and I'll start with Sonia to begin with, is we're very early in everything COVID, but I'm wondering on just a general level how biophilic design and COVID-19 mitigation would be working together.
Yeah, so we've been thinking about that, and I'll mention a few things. And Joe and I have actually been talking about this in some of our shared communities. I think direct contact with nature is really important right now. It's also really important that we keep in mind that finances for a lot of organizations and for a lot of people are limited right now. So we can't be asking for these extraordinary things, but we can ask for the simple things. And it's really interesting and exciting for me to work in design and be able to have conversations with clients that talk about how can we help you to create policies or support you in creating policies or direct you to places where we can also talk about things like operations and advisement to your staff and your organization to take mental health breaks, to go outside, to take walks. To me, it might even be a little less about the building right now. You know, and then there's simple things like important things like advocating for more plants inside, I think is really important. And maybe it's about creating some visual barriers or some indirect barriers with, I don't like the word barriers, but it is what it is. So I think about those things, but I think it's never been more important to realize that connection with nature. There's a study that's 40 seconds. I don't think this was in the film. 40 seconds of being out in nature. And you can see a physiological response in the body. It doesn't take much. And thank God it's going to get cooler soon. We can actually go outside.
Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Yep. I will say the sun's going down a little earlier, so that's got to tell us something, right?
Yeah.
Joe, in terms of plants and all of the mitigation process, one of the things I've been curious about is, you know, it seems as though every office space now, you know, how, you know, the things that people wear over the faces, you know, maybe Sonia can elaborate a little bit more on how people are spreading out in spaces more and having less people. But just in terms of keeping up your plants, I know that they're using a lot of chemistry in order to, you know, to disinfect, to knock down, you know, virus and such like that. Does that have any effect, and do you have to adjust for that with your plants?
So we haven't yet. I heard, you know, there's a lot of disinfectant companies kind of coming on the scene. And I think most of them, for the most part, are using the same type of disinfectant. And I think the most effective one is I forget the name of the chemical, but it's used electrostatically. And we haven't had, I haven't heard of any, you know, physical damage going on. Well, I heard of one, but I think it got sprayed and put outside in the sun and burned. So I think that was, you know, that was something. But in terms of working with clients, I mean, Sonia talked a little bit about, you know, separators or your barriers. You know, we're trying to figure out how to work with clients to create, in fact, the last 2 office lobbies that we did, the client specifically wanted rectangular planter boxes that they could separate their seating areas in the lobby so that they could create private spaces. So created private spaces. First of all, it's fortunate that these particular projects had the budget to do that, because it's not like, you know, as someone who has a small office, you know, trying to operate on a, you know, small overhead budget can just, you know, afford to do this in their whole spaces. So one of the things that we do is we try to work with them financially, either over time, or we create programs where, you know, we can help them fulfill those, you know, whatever needs they are, but not make it such a huge financial impact, you know, coming in. So we're really, one of the things as a company we kind of pride ourselves on is, you know, figuring out what our clients need and then helping them to get that. So every client, so we don't have this, although we have this sort of template, I guess, but there's a lot of variables can go into it to try and help the client, you know, get what they need. So, so it's really about, you know, as Sonia said, listening to the client, figuring out what they need. Maybe not, you know, maybe giving a little where we, you know, or certainly giving a little where we have to. You know, like during COVID, all of our restaurants, you know, we instead of canceling them, we worked with them and kind of delayed any kind of costs or payments, and never said, you know, let us just keep your plants alive, and then as things turn around, we'll figure out, you know, scheduling it back in, because from the business side, it's cheaper to keep a client and give them a little bit of, you know, something, as opposed to, you know, creating a new client. So again, it's about being flexible and listening to what the needs of the client are.
I'm going to skip off of hospitals, because I think that in the last few minutes, I wanted also look and see. I do not see any other questions. So I think I'll ask what may be close to my last question, at least, because this was one of the things that hit me when I first watched the film in 2019. In 2019, the fact of the matter was schools changed drastically. The whole idea of, you know, Camelback High School, Joe, you know, what did we have? One security guy who just basically made sure we didn't smoke on campus, you know, and
we did anyway, but that's
yeah, we did anyway, you know, or wherever we could. But you know, it was, you know, there were open campuses. There were certainly a lot different. I've seen buildings that have gone up in the last few years, and I'm not going to use them as examples, because I actually think that at some point they're going to change their direction too. But there are buildings going up, slit windows, inward facing. We're actually a town that is not used to having schools with hallways, but we're kind of getting used to that direction more and more now. You know, we were a breezeway community when Joe and I were in school. But the question I would ask, and I'll ask you, Sonia, and then how Joe would respond to this too. But the schools are different. There's security, and now there's the COVID. And frankly, there's going to be the COVID and the flu together this fall. So we're going to have to be, a school has to be different and has to, but can a school be a good school and still support the biophilic design ideas that you see in the film, while at the same time, you know, it appears as though we're not going back in terms of thinking of security of schools. So you know, again, there was sort of a jarring recognition that between 2011 and 2019, there was a lot different attitudes about how schools work and how they function. Can we come back to what is championed in the film?
That's heavy. I mean, I have a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy with, I'm very happy with the public school program she's in. And I'm very happy with the administration and the staff. They're wonderful. I am not happy with the design of that school. Every day I worry about her. Every day I'm like, your circadian rhythms, honey, look at the sun. And I'm like, I'm actually kind of happy she's going to school from home this year, because the blinds are always open in her room. I don't know how we've forgotten that children need natural light. I mean, their mood, their sleep cycles, their hormone developments. If anyone has not heard of Children in Nature Network, it would be great to look up if this is something that's of interest to you. But there's a risk factor, right? So what are the risk and statistics around the security needed at schools and the accidents that are happening versus the health implications that are coming because of how we're designing our schools like prisons? And I have to say that I am prouder of many of the healthcare facilities we're designing than we are our schools. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to change. I think we need to reach more of these master plans for our schools. And I don't think LEED is the answer. You know, sustainability is important, but it's more than that. It's the natural light, it's the beauty, it's the culture, it's the plants, it's the plantings. So I think we can do it, Steve. I think we need to do it.
Good. Joe, your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, we could debate about what's happening and what's going to happen, what's the future of education and how it's going to be presented in that. But I do think, so a few years back, I visited an outdoor school outside of Atlanta. And these kids had their, you know, their boots outside and their jackets outside, and they were outside, rain or shine. I mean, you know, they had little rooms that, you know, that they, you know, they could be in, you know, learning some things, but for the most part, all their activities they did outside. And so I'm a real advocate of the more you can, I just think that kids learn better outside. I think they're more relaxed outside. They're less restricted, and I just think they have a better opportunity if they get, you know, as Sonia said. I mean, what happens to sunlight? Just something as simple as daylighting, you know,
Right.
seems like a given, right, in any school, but many schools we don't see it. So so I would like to see more of that. Even, I mean, there's a saying that, you know, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. You know, so, you know, I think that certainly not everybody can do that, and not every place can do that, but I do think that we could continue to advocate for more outdoor education.
I'm going to go to a couple of questions here because I see some great notes on the sheet here. Jim McPherson saying it's the dreaming while looking outside the window. That's what's important. I understand. So a question from Ruth. I participated in a local Zoom presentation last night from Climate Reality Project and Citizens Climate Lobby. They never mentioned plants or trees or biophilic design that can apply to more than buildings. Any thoughts on that? And Joe, since you're in my screen, go for it.
Oh boy. Well, I know of the Climate Reality Project, but I don't know it well. But my understanding is that it's more environmentally based. So I'm probably not qualified to answer that much more than that. So, yeah.
I'll leave it at that. Sonia, anything to add?
So it's the lack of connection between biophilia and climate change. There was a really good paper that was published about a year ago on biophilic design and climate change. And it was actually, if you look up the ILFI, the Biophilic Design Initiative that we've mentioned, it'll be posted there. So, and it's a collection including Judith Heerwagen, who's been a wonderful advocate and educator. There are quite a few connections between mitigating climate change and biophilic cities and the importance of it. So that's working at the community scale. It's more connected to the work that Tim Beatley's been doing for biophilic cities, which is another good resource, and something that we've been involved with here in Phoenix, which is great. But there's still more to be done to help, of course, make biophilic cities and make them walkable when we can. But yeah, a really strong connection that I don't think there's been enough covered on. But biophilic cities would be probably the best resource. Mm-hmm. And looking up that paper, Julia Africa was the primary author on that paper.
All right, I'm just going to throw one thing in here because Brian Ballard wrote a note to everybody, and I don't know if you all see it. It says, good questions and concerns about schools. Even when school clients have the wrong idea about spaces, it's best to justify design moves that create biophilia and natural light in any way possible. So I like that. And then Jim's nice enough to put the study up. I have no idea how those chat things save.
Yes.
I'm going to figure out that eventually. Jim is probably going to help me with this. I'm going to wrap it up, but I'm going to say, first of all, thank you to Sonia and Joe for being here and for providing the panel that this film needed. Now, the trick is, if you haven't seen the film, please see the film. How do you do that? Well, it's a convoluted process, as it seems sometimes, especially through Facebook, but I would urge you to go to nofestivalrequired.com, where I have diligently changed every link and tried to make it, workable for y'all. This virtual cinema thing is a little new for me, but I want to thank Joe and Sonia. I also want to say that if you are interested in this film and films of this nature, my goal, frankly, is, the original goal was by this summer, actually probably by April, I would have been working on Some Assembly Required Part 2. The next series that I hope to do, because architecture has just been a really great source of films and community response, and I've tried to approach it from many different angles, and I'm appreciative of the architecture and design community who have come out to see the films as I've done them. You can sign up on the mailing list at nofestivalrequired.com, and I send out things regularly. And I will, if you follow me on Facebook, which is, I believe is No Festival Required, one word after facebook.com, I will be posting the actual talk that we're doing tonight. I'll be putting it up on YouTube, setting up a link for you to show to other people. Thank you again. Thanks to everybody who showed up. If I'm missing anything, send me an email. and everybody have a wonderful.
Steve, I want to thank you, and thank you for all the work that you put in, bringing films to the Valley, and you're kind of a legend. So,
geez,
thanks for doing
I'm only
that.
a legend in my own mind. But thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And as long as there are films and people to come watch them, I'll keep showing them however I can. It's pretty much the story at this point. So, again, thank you all, and I will adjourn.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.